Part 1: The Man in the Corner. The First National Bank of Fairview opened at 9 a.m. sharp, just as it had for the last 73 years. The security guard unlocked the heavy glass doors, waved to the older couple waiting to deposit pension checks, and nodded at the mailman walking briskly by with his headphones in. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Clean. A little too bright under the fluorescent lights. Behind the counter, two tellers reviewed the morning schedule while sipping lukewarm coffee. At the far end, in the corner by the rack of pens and bank-branded calendars, sat a man in a wheelchair. He wore a plain navy windbreaker, khaki pants neatly pressed, and brown loafers that had been polished to a shine. A navy blue ball cap shaded his face, and his gloved hands rested quietly on the wheels of his chair. He had been there since 8:45. No one had spoken to him yet. The quiet figure. His name was Caleb Briggs, though no one in that branch recognized it. To them, he was just another quiet man waiting to deposit a check or perhaps speak with a manager about loan options. But Caleb was not here for a deposit. And he was not here for a withdrawal either. He was waiting for something. Watching. Listening. His eyes scanned the lobby with patient calculation, every corner, every camera, every person who entered. He saw the single mother juggling her toddler and a baby bag. He saw the young man nervously pulling a crumpled check from his back pocket. He saw the manager's office door click shut behind a man in a gray suit. And more importantly, he saw the two men who entered at 9:12. The entrance. They came in together but stood apart. One headed straight for the pamphlets, pretending to read about checking accounts. The other moved slowly toward the line, glancing at the ceiling, checking the corners like he was searching for inspiration. Caleb saw it instantly. The fake hesitation. The matching jackets. The earpiece tucked into one ear. They were not here for banking. They were here for something else. Caleb turned his head slightly, just enough to spot the security guard near the front entrance, older man, coffee in hand, standing too far from the silent alarm. It was going to happen. Today. Here. And Caleb was the only one who knew it. The setup. He had seen them before. Not those exact two, but others just like them. Nervous hands, eyes that could not stay still, heavy boots that moved too quietly. He had been trained to recognize threats before they announced themselves. And even now, even from a wheelchair, that instinct had never left him. He moved one hand to his lap, where a small notebook sat beneath a faded canvas blanket. Inside the notebook, hand-drawn maps, handwritten notes, observation logs. He had been following this crew for 6 weeks. He had not told anyone. Not yet. Because Caleb Briggs was not just a man in a wheelchair. He was a retired intelligence officer. And today was the day he finally caught them. The flashpoint. At exactly 9:17, it began. The man in the line stepped forward, pulled a gun from under his coat, and shouted, "Everyone down!" Hands on the floor. Screams echoed off the marble walls. The second man moved to the door, locking it behind him and pointing his weapon at the security guard, who froze in place. The manager's office door flew open. Chaos. Panic. Movement. Except from one person. Caleb did not flinch. He sat still. Eyes calm. Hands resting gently on the sides of his chair. He had expected this moment. He had prepared for it. And they had no idea. The plan begins. While the others hit the floor, Caleb slowly shifted his left hand beneath his blanket, clicking a small switch embedded in his armrest. It sent a silence signal. A private alert, not to 911, but to a separate encrypted line monitored by one person only, his former partner, Elise Monroe, now working with an underground security task force designed to assist ex-agents in the civilian world. The robbers had no idea that Caleb Briggs had once dismantled black market arms rings in Eastern Europe. That he had once served in covert operations under false identities in 6 countries. Or that he had come to this bank not to catch them by accident but to draw them out. To end this. The eyes of the room. One of the robbers approached him. "Old man," he barked, pointing the gun. "You deaf? Get on the ground." Caleb did not move. The robber stepped closer, poking the gun toward him. Caleb looked up, voice low but firm. "I cannot. You see the chair." The man sneered. "Smart mouth. Want to lose some teeth?" Caleb kept his gaze steady. "I do not want anyone to get hurt. But you are making that difficult." The robber stepped back, uneasy. He could not explain it, but something about the man in the wheelchair bothered him. His stillness. His certainty. His lack of fear. He turned away, muttering a curse. And Caleb, beneath the blanket, quietly activated a second switch. The building's internal cameras began uploading directly to Elisa's secure server. Evidence. Documentation. Live intel. The end of the beginning. In 12 minutes, it would all change. In 12 minutes, someone would make a mistake. Caleb just needed to buy a little more time. He looked around the room at the terrified faces. Mothers. Children. Working men. Bank employees. They all thought he was just a man in a wheelchair, trapped, powerless. But Caleb Briggs knew better. And soon. So would they. Part 2, Bred in Broken Moments. Caleb Briggs had been trained to withstand interrogation. He had learned how to control his breathing under stress, how to read a room without moving his eyes, how to disarm someone with a sentence instead of a weapon. But none of that prepared him for what it felt like to watch a little boy cry into his mother's chest while the muzzle of a gun hovered nearby. The lobby had gone still, the kind of stillness that wrapped itself around the throat. Children whimpered. A woman prayed softly under her breath. The security guard sat slumped against the wall with his hands raised, eyes closed like he was already apologizing to his family for not being braver. Caleb had seen fear in many forms on battlefields, in border towns, in the half-lit basements of foreign cities. But this was the worst kind. This was helpless fear. The thief with a hunger. The taller of the 2 robbers, the one who had started barking orders, was beginning to sweat. His name, Caleb had discovered weeks ago, was Darren Lawton, age 37, dishonorably discharged from the Army 5 years prior after a failed smuggling operation. He had a pattern. Violent, impulsive, and often distracted by petty indulgences. Which was why Caleb was not surprised when Darren suddenly shouted toward the back of the bank, "Do you have anything to eat in this place?" A young teller lifted her head. "There's a staff fridge in the break room. Maybe some sandwiches or frozen meals." Darren scowled. "Go. Bring it out. Everything." She stood with shaking hands and walked behind the counter. Caleb narrowed his eyes. This was the window. People who were full made worse decisions. If he played this right, Darren would give him exactly what he needed. Food as a fault line. The teller returned minutes later carrying a tray piled with wrapped sandwiches, granola bars, and a few cans of soda. Darren ripped open the first sandwich without checking what it was. Turkey and cheese. A white bun. Wrapped in wax paper. He took a large bite. Finally, he muttered. Something normal. He tossed another sandwich to his partner, who caught it with one hand and did not eat. Darren turned to the rest of the hostages. Anyone wants something, raise your hand. But try anything stupid, and you eat bullets instead. No one moved. Caleb raised his hand. Darren raised an eyebrow. You, old man? You hungry? Caleb nodded. Something soft would be good. Dental work's not what it used to be. A few people around him stared, surprised that he dared speak. Darren snorted and tossed him a wrapped sandwich. It landed on the blanket draped over Caleb's legs. Ham and cheese. White bread. Thin mustard. A cheap meal. But it meant access. Caleb took it, unwrapped it slowly, and set the napkin aside. He took a bite. Chewed. Swallowed. And then he spoke. The strategy beneath the crumbs. Want to know something funny? Caleb said, his voice calm, directed toward Darren but loud enough for others to hear. Darren turned to him, annoyed but curious. You are making the same mistake every man like you makes, Caleb said between bites. Darren stepped closer. Which is? You brought weapons. But you forgot patience. You came in for fast money, and you are about to get caught slowly. Darren pointed the gun. Shut up. Caleb did not blink. Or what? You shoot a disabled man in front of a child? He gestured toward the little boy still clinging to his mother. You want the media photo to be your face next to that? Darren hesitated. A pause. Just one beat. But it was enough. Caleb's eyes scanned the room. He had planted doubt. Now it would grow. Elise on the other side. 3 blocks away, in a modest building with blacked-out windows, Elise Monroe sat at a console, eyes locked on the security feed Caleb had routed to her. He is in, she whispered to herself. The footage was grainy but stable. She could see Darren's face clearly now. And Caleb's expression calm, calculating. She reached for her headset. Unit 1, this is Watchtower. We have visual. Confirming suspect Lawton in second male still unidentified. A voice crackled back. Confirmed. Do we breach? Elise paused. Caleb had warned her in the coded message, wait. Not yet. No breach, she said. Not until we get the go signal. She watched Caleb take another bite of the sandwich. And she smiled. Come on, Briggs. Let them think you are just another broken man. The power of bread. Caleb finished the sandwich. Wiped his mouth. Then, slowly, he crumpled the paper and dropped it into the wastebasket near his chair. No one noticed the way the paper landed. Or the small metal disc tucked into the folds, barely the size of a coin. It clicked softly as it hit the bottom. Activated. A relay signal. The robbers still thought they were in control. They had no idea they were now inside a net. Breaking the pattern. The second robber, stockier, quieter, paced near the side door, gripping his weapon tighter. He was beginning to lose his nerve. Caleb had seen this before. One dominant leader. One reluctant follower. If he pushed at the edges, the quiet one might crack. He waited for the moment. Let the silence sit. Then spoke again. You do not want to do this, he said gently. The second man turned toward him. I did not ask you. You do not have to be him, Caleb said, nodding toward Darren. You still have time to walk out. Tell the truth. Let them know you did not fire a shot. The man hesitated. Just for a second. Then turned away. Caleb saw the look in his eyes. Regret. There was still a way out for him. If Caleb could keep him from making the wrong choice. Emil remembered. For a moment, the chaos in the room faded. Caleb leaned back slightly. He remembered another meal, long ago, after his final field assignment. He had been in Istanbul, the evening after a hostage rescue that had nearly gone wrong. A small cafe. A plate of lamb stew and bread still warm from the oven. His team had been silent. But the food had soothed something none of them had words for. Tonight, a sandwich and a robbed bank had done the same. Not because it was good, but because it anchored him. Time slipping. The clock above the teller station clicked forward. 9:36 a.m. Caleb had bought nearly 20 minutes of calm. He could not hold it much longer. But the signal had been sent. Elise was watching. The building was surrounded. And soon, the robbers would understand who he really was. And it would be too late. Part 3, The Crack in the Glass. At exactly 9:37 a.m., the tension inside the First National Bank became static, not loud, not explosive, but charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. The robbers had stopped shouting. The hostages had stopped crying. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed too loud. Caleb Briggs sat still in his wheelchair, hands resting gently in his lap, blanket neatly folded across his legs. On the surface, he appeared unchanged. But under the blanket, a second switch on the right armrest had just been activated, subtly pressed between his thumb and palm. It was time for Phase 2. Phase 2 wasn't violence. Violence was easy. That was the mistake most people made. Violence was immediate, visible, and often desperate. Caleb had learned long ago that disruption in quiet, precise, untraceable disruption was what dismantled the enemy's grip. It confused them, slowed them, made them question themselves before they questioned the room. Phase 2 was not a gun. It was a distraction. And it began with a bag of trail mix. The second move. 30 feet away, a teenager named Jacob was sitting behind the front desk. He had been hired as a temp just 2 weeks earlier. Now, he was trying not to hyperventilate while hiding under his desk, knees hugged to his chest. Before the robbery began, he had been eating breakfast at his station, a simple plastic bag of trail mix from the vending machine, half opened, resting beside his keyboard. The moment Caleb triggered the second switch, a small magnetic pulse released from the coin-shaped device in the wastebasket. The lights flickered. Twice. Every fluorescent bulb blinked, dimmed, then returned. Just enough to make the room feel haunted. Darren Lawton cursed under his breath. What the hell was that? Caleb said nothing. Darren spun toward the desk where Jacob sat hidden. You! Get up! Did you touch something? Jacob stood, trembling, hands raised. No, sir. I swear. As he rose, his elbow knocked the bag of trail mix off the desk. It hit the floor with a loud crinkle and scattered almonds, peanuts, and raisins in every direction. Darren raised the gun. The room gasped. Caleb spoke. The intervention. Careful, he said, calmly, clearly. Darren turned. What did I say about talking? I know, Caleb replied. But a man who panics over trail mix is not a man in control of his plan. Darren's eyes narrowed. Keep talking, old man, and I will. You will what? Caleb asked. Prove me right? Darren hesitated. Just long enough. Caleb turned to Jacob, still frozen beside the desk. It is all right, son. Just step back and sit down slowly. Jacob obeyed. And the moment passed. But Caleb had seen what he needed. Darren was unraveling. The rift. The second robber, still unnamed, approached Darren quietly. This is taking too long, he whispered. Darren wiped his brow with the back of his hand. We stay until the vault opens. No matter what. The second man glanced toward Caleb, then back at his partner. He's right. This was supposed to be fast. Darren snarled. You losing your nerve now? Caleb caught the exchange. There it was. Doubt. A splinter between them. It was the same splinter he had used to dismantle operations overseas. You did not crush a unit all at once. You pried it apart. Elise watching closely. In the command van parked 2 blocks away, Elise Monroe watched the scene unfold through 3 split screens. One showed Darren pacing. Another showed the second man adjusting his grip on the weapon. The third was centered on Caleb, still unmoving. She leaned closer. He was doing it. He was tilting the game without touching the board. She tapped her headset. Team, we have movement. Suspect 1 is destabilizing. Suspect 2 showing hesitation. Do we breach? A voice asked. Negative, Elise said. Briggs is still in play. Her eyes never left the screen. Let him cook. The food that changed everything. By 9:47, the quiet had returned. The robbers still held their weapons, but their posture had changed. Nervous. Sloppy. They kept glancing at the clock. Caleb could almost hear their thoughts. Why hasn't the police rushed in? Why is no one panicking anymore? Why is the man in the wheelchair so damn calm? Then something unexpected happened. One of the hostages, a woman named Teresa, who worked at the florist across the street, suddenly spoke. I'm sorry, she whispered. But I'm getting lightheaded. Darren turned. Sit down. I need something to eat. Caleb's voice cut in again. There are more snacks in the break room, he said. Let me get them. Darren raised the gun toward him again. You think I am stupid? No, Caleb replied. But I think you are hungry. And everyone in here is thinking less clearly now. A long pause. Then Darren pointed to the second man. You go. Bring whatever is in there. The man disappeared behind the corner. Seconds later, he returned with a tray holding granola bars, crackers, bottled water, and 2 small apples. He set it down on the lobby table. Teresa reached slowly for a granola bar, hands shaking. Then something incredible happened. Caleb reached into the tray. Picked up the second apple. Turned it over once in his gloved hand. And took a slow, clean bite. The bite that said everything. The crunch echoed in the room. Not loud. But meaningful. It was not just hunger. It was defiance. Caleb chewed thoughtfully. The sweetness hit his tongue slowly, cool, crisp, tart at the edges. A Granny Smith, if he had to guess. He swallowed. Then looked up at Darren and said, You may have guns. But I have time. And people who trust me. That is the difference. Darren stepped forward, gun raised. You do not know anything. Caleb did not flinch. I know who you are. And soon, everyone else will too. The final nudge. The clock now read 9:54. Less than 6 minutes until Elise's team would move in, with or without a signal. Caleb knew it. Darren did not. The second man stepped away from his partner. I am done, he said quietly. I did not sign up for this. Do not walk, Darren hissed. You walk, you are no better than him. The second man looked at Caleb. Then at the door. Then at the people around him. And took 2 steps back. Gun lowered. The room holds its breath. Darren looked around. Everyone was staring. He had lost control. Completely. He gripped the weapon tighter. Shaking now. And Caleb, calm as ever, took another bite of the apple. Another crunch. Another quiet act of resistance. Part 4, Crumbs in Control. At 9:55 a.m., the mood inside the First National Bank shifted. You could not see it. But you could feel it. A change in pressure. Like the moment just before glass breaks. Darren Lawton, sweating, pacing, and still holding a firearm, had not noticed the shift. But everyone else had. Especially Caleb Briggs. The second gunman had stepped away from Darren. His weapon now hung by his side, no longer aimed at anyone. He stood near the front window, staring out at the street where shoppers passed without knowing how close they were to disaster. Caleb took another slow bite of the green apple he had picked from the breakroom tray. The fruit was cool on his tongue. Sweet, but sour too. It reminded him of childhood. Of a time when food had been more than fuel. It had been comfort. Anchor. Meaning. Today, it was a signal. Watching the cracks spread. Darren glanced around the room, eyes moving too fast. His plan was unraveling, and he knew it. The vault timer had not budged. The hostages were too quiet. The silence felt heavy, expectant. And the man in the wheelchair, the damn man, had not shown a flicker of fear since the first shout. Darren walked toward him. Pointed the gun. You think this is funny? He snapped. Caleb met his eyes. I think you have reached the edge of your story, he said calmly. And you do not like how it ends. A voice from the past. Darren stepped closer. I have nothing to lose, he muttered. Caleb's voice stayed steady. That is never true. I was discarded, Darren said, bitterness swelling in his tone. I served. Got my hands dirty so people like you could sleep. Then they kicked me out like trash. You were not discarded, Caleb said softly. You chose to disappear. Darren froze. The room held its breath. How would you know? He demanded. Caleb took the final bite of the apple. Chewed. Swallowed. Then said. Because I almost did the same. Elise counts the seconds. In the surveillance van, Elise Monroe watched the exchange unfold on screen. She leaned closer to the monitor, her face unreadable, one finger hovering over the radio's transmit button. A voice crackled in her earpiece. Entry team in position. Do we move? She paused. Her eyes locked on Caleb. He was leading Darren. Right to the edge. Negative, she whispered. Not yet. The crumbs on the floor. Caleb leaned slightly forward in his wheelchair. You know what this is, Darren? He asked, motioning to the apple core in his hand. Darren said nothing. Caleb dropped it onto the floor beside him, where it rolled slightly and rested among a few scattered breadcrumbs from the earlier sandwich tray. It is the end of a decision, Caleb said. You can throw it away, or you can plant what is left and grow something new. You sound like a teacher, Darren spat. No, Caleb replied. I sound like a man who knows what it feels like to waste years. But you still have time. Darren stared at him. Longer now. The gun lowered slightly. And for a moment, it seemed like he might drop it. Might surrender. Might end it here. But then. The alarm sound. A cell phone rang. Shrill. Sharp. Too loud. It came from behind the counter, probably one of the teller's devices, forgotten in a coat or purse. Darren flinched. Spun. Raised the gun. People screamed. The quiet cracked like ice under pressure. Caleb moves. In that instant, Caleb pressed the third switch beneath the blanket on his lap. It was the last one. Not a signal. Not a camera trigger. It released the brakes on his wheelchair. And activated manual mode. He had not used it in years. But he remembered. Always remember your exit, he had told recruits. And sometimes, you build your exit into your seat. He pushed off with his hands, the chair rolling silently toward the center of the room, away from the cluster of hostages, away from the counter, directly toward Darren. The unexpected advance. Darren turned back just as Caleb reached the midpoint between them. The sudden movement startled him. The man in the wheelchair was moving, not being pushed, not repositioned. He was advancing. Deliberately. "Stop!" Darren shouted, raising the gun again. But Caleb did not stop. He rolled forward. Measured. Eyes locked. "No," Caleb said. "You stop." The weapon trembled in Darren's hands. "You think I will not do it?" "I think," Caleb replied, "you are out of control, and your partner has already left you behind." The second robber now stood against the far wall, both hands raised, his weapon on the ground. He would not move again. The gun falls. Caleb reached the invisible line between recklessness and redemption. And stopped. "I am not armed," he said. "But you do not need me to be." Darren's hands shook violently now. His shoulders hunched. Eyes darting. Caleb saw it happen. The same moment he had seen on faces before. The recognition of defeat. Darren let the gun fall to the floor. It landed with a soft clack, less dramatic than the room expected. It skidded a few inches across the tile. And silence returned. But this time, it was healing. Not fear. The entry. Elisa's voice crackled through the radio. "Go." The doors burst open seconds later. Officers moved in, calm but fast. The second robber stepped back and placed his hands behind his head. Darren dropped to his knees. Not a single shot had been fired. No one injured. Caleb sat still in the center of it all. Chest rising and falling. Hands steady. The final bite. Later, as statements were taken and order restored, Rosa arrived with a basket of scones and muffins. "I thought someone might need something warm," she said, offering the basket first to Caleb. He picked a cinnamon scone. Broke it in half. The steam rose gently. He handed one half to Jacob, the young temp who had knocked over the trail mix. "Thank you for staying calm," Caleb said. Jacob's eyes widened. "I thought I messed everything up." "You gave us a moment," Caleb replied. "That is all we needed." They ate in silence. Crumbs on the floor. But peace in the room. Part 5, Soup and Silence. 2 days had passed since the incident at the First National Bank. The headlines still buzzed. Disabled veteran thwarts armed robbery without firing a shot. Mysterious man in wheelchair foils heist using only words and wit. Who is Caleb Briggs? But Caleb had not read any of them. He sat at his kitchen table, the newspaper folded on the counter behind him, untouched. He had made a simple breakfast: scrambled eggs with parsley, toasted rye bread, and a wedge of cheddar cheese. It sat cooling in front of him, half-eaten. His appetite had not fully returned, even though his stomach was fine. He stared at the steam rising from the eggs, one hand loosely curled around a mug of tea that had long since gone lukewarm. The ache that was not pain. He was not injured. No one was. But still, his muscles ached. Not from exertion. From memory. For 2 days, he had felt people watching him differently. The woman at the corner store had offered him free coffee. The mechanic down the street had saluted him. A group of teenagers had asked for a selfie outside the pharmacy. He had smiled. He had nodded. He had said thank you. But none of it felt real. The truth was, he missed the quiet. The anonymity. And yet, part of him also missed the purpose. The call from Elise. Around 10:30 that morning, his phone buzzed. Elise Monroe. He let it ring once before answering. "Good morning," he said. "You sound awake." "I have been awake for 3 hours." "Are you eating?" "Trying." There was a pause. Then, "Meet me for lunch?" He considered it. then asked, "Where?" "You pick." He hesitated again. Then said, "There is a place near the lake. Small place. Quiet. You will like the chowder. The cafe by the lake." The restaurant was tucked into a weathered brick building with white trim and a faded sign that simply read Alma's. No neon. No music. Just the smell of sea salt, butter, and baked bread that lingered near the door like an old friend. Caleb sat at a small table by the window. The lake beyond shimmered in the winter sunlight, flat and silver blue. He had already ordered by the time Elise arrived 2 bowls of clam chowder, a basket of rosemary rolls, and a pitcher of lemon water. She slid into the seat across from him and smiled. "I knew you would beat me here." "You are predictable," he replied. "You mean punctual." "Same thing." The first bite of normal. The chowder came in thick ceramic bowls, heavy and warm to the touch. Creamy broth, tender clams, diced potatoes, and flecks of black pepper and thyme. Caleb tore a roll in half and dipped it into the soup, letting it soak for a few seconds before lifting it to his mouth. He chewed slowly. It was rich, comforting. Not fancy. But real. The kind of food that did not ask questions. Elise took her first bite and let out a breath. "I forgot how good this is." "Food made with time usually is," Caleb replied. The debrief that was not a debrief. They ate in silence for a while before Elise finally spoke. "You should know," she said, "there is talk about giving you a formal commendation." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "For eating a sandwich and outweighing a fool? For preventing a shootout? For protecting every person in that bank? For controlling a situation with 0 loss of life?" He sipped his water. "I did what needed doing. That is exactly why they want to recognize it." He shrugged. "I am not a hero. You do not get to decide that. I never wanted to be one. That, too, is exactly why you are." A shared history. Elise leaned back in her chair, tearing her second roll into pieces. "You remember Istanbul?" she asked suddenly. Caleb nodded. "The market standoff. You sat on a bench and bought a kebab while the informant made the drop." "It was lamb," Caleb said. "With mint yogurt sauce. I still remember the smell." "You did not flinch when the sniper took the shot." "I was chewing." Elise laughed softly. Then her voice grew quiet. "You always found a way to make people feel calm. Even when things were falling apart." He looked down at his soup. "I was not always calm inside." "Still isn't the point." A stranger's gift. As they finished their meal, the waitress, a young woman with dark curls tucked into a headscarf, approached their table with a small envelope. She placed it in front of Caleb and said, "The man who was sitting near the kitchen left this. He said he recognized you from the news." Caleb opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt for their meal, paid in full. And written on the back, "Thank you. My daughter was in the bank. You saved her life. If you ever want a home-cooked meal, we live above Cafe Miriam on Delancey Street. No questions. Just gratitude." Caleb stared at the note. Folded it slowly. Placed it into his coat pocket. And said nothing. Walking the shoreline. After lunch, he and Elise walked the path along the lake. The wind cut through the air, but the sun kept it from stinging. Waves lapped gently at the shore, gulls swooping lazily above the rocks. "You will not go, will you?" Elise asked. "To the ceremony? To the press? The interviews? The coverage?" "No," Caleb said. "That is not my part to play." She nodded. "You will cook again?" "I might." "For the people?" "For myself. The leftover roll." That night, back home, Caleb opened the paper bag the waitress had handed him as they left. Inside was one leftover rosemary roll, wrapped in parchment and tied with string. He placed it on a plate, made a small bowl of lentil soup to go with it, and sat at his table. He tore the bread open. Steam rose gently. He dipped it into the soup. A bite of salt, herb, and comfort. And for the first time in many years, he felt full. Not just from food, but from belonging. Part 6, The Bread Table. It was Saturday morning, and the city was still stretching. The sidewalks were damp from a light overnight rain, and the cold had softened just enough to invite coats instead of parkas. Across the street from the little church on Morningside Avenue, the weekly community market had just begun setting up. Volunteers unfolded tables, clicked together folding chairs, and carried trays of bread and fruit from the back of an aging white van. Caleb Briggs sat in his chair at the edge of the setup, gloved hands folded, watching the quiet orchestra of movement. He had not intended to come. But Elise had texted him the night before. Free bread and awkward people. You belong. He had smiled. Then said yes. A gentle welcome. The woman in charge was named Darlene. She was in her late 50s, with a streak of silver in her tightly pulled ponytail and eyes that did not miss much. She had read about Caleb in the newspaper and greeted him like an old friend. Glad you made it, she said, setting down a crate of apples beside him. I was told there would be awkwardness, Caleb replied. Oh, plenty of that, she said with a grin. But also something warm. Come help me at the bread table. You seem like the kind of man who understands patience. He followed her to the corner table beneath a bright orange canopy. It was already filled with trays, sourdough, rye, braided challah, small herb loaves, and bagged dinner rolls stacked neatly in twine. People can take what they need, Darlene said. No questions. No judgment. Caleb nodded. He liked that. Faces and hands. The first customer was a young woman with two small children, one on each side. Her daughter picked up a roll and held it to her nose, giggling. Caleb offered her a bag, and the girl's mother thanked him quietly. Next came an older man with arthritic hands who asked if the rye had caraway seeds. It did. Caleb helped him choose a softer loaf instead. An hour passed that way. People came. People smiled. No one asked for photos. No one mentioned the word hero. They just asked about bread. And somehow, that mattered more. The scent of purpose. Around 10:15, the light changed. Sun broke through the clouds, and the tables lit up. Caleb sat back in his chair for a moment and breathed in the smell of it all: warm yeast, baked crust, cinnamon from the nearby pastry stand, and that old familiar mix of city air and humanity. There had been a time when he lived by orders and intel. Now, he lived by moments like this. A quiet place to give without being asked. A seat at a table without needing a title. The boy with the jacket. Toward the end of the market, a boy around 12 approached the table. He wore a jacket too big for him, sleeves past his hands, and shoes that looked like they had been through 2 winters already. He did not speak at first. Just looked. Then pointed at a braided challah loaf near the center of the table. Caleb reached for it. You like this one? The boy nodded. Want to take one home? Another nod. But he did not reach for the bread. Instead, he pulled something from his coat pocket. A sandwich. Wrapped in wax paper. Half eaten. Trade? The boy asked, voice barely above a whisper. Caleb blinked. Then nodded. He handed the boy the challah, and the boy handed him the sandwich. The boy's eyes were hopeful. Eager. He turned and walked away quickly, arms wrapped around the loaf like it might fly away. The sandwich. Caleb unwrapped the sandwich slowly. peanut butter and jelly. White bread. Crushed at the edges, but whole. He held it for a long moment before taking a bite. The peanut butter stuck to the roof of his mouth. The jelly was sweet and tart. The bread was soft but stale at the edges. Still, it was perfect. Not because it was made with precision, but because it was given without hesitation. That kind of food had value no currency could match. A quiet conversation. Darlene returned from checking the produce table and sat beside him. "I saw that," she said. He insisted. "He reminded me of my son." Before he left. Left? "Got into some trouble," she said softly. "We are talking again." Slowly. Caleb nodded. "You know," she added, "people talk about you like you are a story. But you sit here like you are just a man handing out bread." "Because I am." "Not everyone would agree. Most people are wrong more often than they admit." She laughed. Then grew quiet. "There is something healing about this, is there not?" Caleb looked around. The empty trays. The crumbs on the table. The warmth in the silence. "There is. A gift in a paper bag." Before the market closed, an older woman approached him. She wore a knitted shawl and walked with the help of a cane. She did not take bread. Instead, she handed him a small paper bag. "This is for you," she said. Caleb opened it. Inside, wrapped in a napkin, was a slice of banana bread. Moist. Dark brown. Studded with walnuts. He looked up. "I did not ask for anything." "You did not have to," she replied. "You reminded me of my husband. He was quiet, too. Kind. We used to come here together. He would have liked you." She smiled. And walked away. Banana bread in memory. Back home, Caleb made a cup of tea and unwrapped the banana bread. The texture was soft but dense. The flavor deep, sweet banana, buttery crumble, and the bitter crunch of walnut in every bite. He chewed slowly. Eyes closed. There was grief in the flavor. But also gratitude. Because someone had remembered something beautiful and passed it on through food. The notebook. That evening, he opened the notebook he had not written in since the bank. He turned to a fresh page. Wrote. "Today, I traded a challah loaf for a sandwich made with small hands. I was fed by strangers and returned to something I did not know I missed. I do not need medals. I need tables like this. And bread that disappears one slice at a time." He closed the notebook. And for the first time in years, made plans for next Saturday. Part 7, The Boy with the Burned Toast. The following Monday, Caleb Briggs received a call he did not expect. He was seated at the small table in his kitchen, peeling a hard-boiled egg with practiced precision. The yolk had come out perfectly centered, no green ring, no cracks. Beside him, a slice of rye bread cooled on a chipped plate, the edges slightly darker than he liked. He had forgotten it in the toaster while staring out the window, lost in thought. Then the phone rang. The name on the screen, Darlene Fulton. He answered on the third ring. "Hello." "Caleb," she said without preamble. "I know this is sudden, but do you remember the boy from the bread table? The one with the coat that was too big?" "I remember. He showed up at the center this morning. Said someone told him there was food. He asked if the man in the chair was here." Caleb felt his chest tighten slightly. "What is his name?" "Marcus," Darlene replied. "He is quiet. Does not say much. But I think he trusts you." Caleb looked down at the half-peeled egg. "What are you asking?" "I am asking if you would come have lunch with him." "Just that." "The center." By noon, Caleb wheeled through the front entrance of the community center. The building smelled faintly of disinfectant and tomato sauce. It was warm, too warm, like many city buildings in winter, compensating for the cold outside by trying too hard to feel like summer inside. Darlene greeted him with a nod and a mug of chamomile tea. "He is in the kitchen," she said. He asked if he could help. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "He is washing apples." The kitchen was small but efficient. Marcus stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, the too big jacket hanging from the back of a chair. His hands moved quickly under the water, flipping apples from one side of the colander to the other, like he had done this before. When he noticed Caleb, he froze. Then nodded. "Hi," Marcus said, barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded back. "Hello, Marcus." Making something simple. Caleb wheeled over to the prep table and opened a brown paper bag he had brought from home. Inside were 2 eggs, a half stick of butter, cinnamon, a splash of vanilla in a small jar, and 4 thick slices of slightly stale challah bread. "French toast," Caleb said, holding up the ingredients. Marcus tilted his head. "I thought you had to eat that with syrup." "You can. But I like it with jam." Caleb unwrapped the bread and passed it to Marcus. "You want to help?" The boy nodded and stepped closer. Caleb cracked the eggs into a shallow bowl. Marcus added cinnamon. The scent lifted into the room like a memory. The frying pan and the conversation. The old stove hissed softly as the first slice of bread hit the pan, butter sizzling around the edges. Marcus watched intently. "My mom burned it," he said suddenly. Caleb turned slightly. "The toast?" Marcus nodded. "Every time. She would put it in, then start brushing her hair, or folding laundry. By the time she remembered, it was smoke and edges." "And you still ate it?" "Sometimes. Sometimes she just threw it away and gave me crackers." Caleb flipped the slice. "You still think about it?" Marcus shrugged. "I do not know. I guess it meant she was trying. Even if she forgot." The second slice went in. The smell deepened. Sitting down together. They ate at the same folding table where seniors played bingo on Thursday afternoons. 2 plates. 2 forks. A jar of raspberry jam between them. Caleb watched as Marcus smeared his slice with jam and took a bite. He chewed slowly, eyes focused on the table, not lifting his gaze. Then, finally, "This is better than crackers." Caleb smiled. "Mine too." They ate in silence. But it was a comfortable one. A crumb of trust. After lunch, Caleb wiped the table while Marcus dried the plates. The boy said, "Do you live by yourself?" "Yes." "Do you ever get lonely?" "Yes." Marcus hesitated. "My school counselor says I should talk to someone. But I do not want to." Caleb looked at him carefully. "Talking is not the only way to be understood." Marcus nodded, lips tight. Then, "Can I come back tomorrow?" Caleb's answer was simple. "Yes." A walk back in time. On the way out, Caleb passed the center's bulletin board. A flyer caught his eye. Open table nights, hot meals and conversations, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. He had always avoided them. Too much noise. Too many people. But now. Maybe it was not about being comfortable. Maybe it was about showing up. He took one of the tear-off slips with the date and address. Home with leftovers. That evening, Caleb returned home and made himself another slice of French toast, just one. He used the last of the challah, the butter browned just right this time. He added a scoop of raspberry jam and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlight flickered over the empty sidewalk. He took a bite. The cinnamon hit first, then the egg-soaked bread, soft inside and crisp at the edges. The jam added tartness, something that clung to the tongue. It was a simple meal. But it felt like a bridge. Not just to Marcus, but to something Caleb had forgotten in himself. The part that believed food could open doors. The notebook. Later that night, he wrote, "I made French toast today with a boy who wore a coat that did not belong to him. He did not ask for advice. He just asked to help. And sometimes, that is how trust begins. With cinnamon. With burned toast. With someone willing to remember." Part 8, The Pot on the Stove. The following Wednesday, just before 4 p.m., the kitchen at the community center buzzed with uneven energy. Volunteers unpacked supplies, washed vegetables, and double-checked serving trays. Music played faintly from a speaker someone had brought, but no one sang along. There was a low hum of movement and soft chatter, but it was clear this meal meant something tonight. It was not just food. It was presence. It was intention. And for Caleb Briggs, it was the first time in years that he would cook for more than one person at a time. The decision. Marcus had asked him on Tuesday afternoon. They had shared apple slices at the window ledge after folding napkins in the back room of the center. The boy had said, "They said I can help cook on Wednesday. You coming?" Caleb had not answered right away. But he had shown up. With his apron rolled under his arm, 2 onions in a paper bag, and a notebook full of scribbled recipes. The recipe that could not be rushed. They settled on a stew. Not from a can. Not from a packet. But a proper stew. With root vegetables, crushed garlic, rosemary, and slow-cooked beef. Caleb had chosen the recipe on purpose. Stew was like rebuilding a broken relationship. It needed time, trust, and heat from every angle. Too fast, and it fell apart. Too long, and it turned bitter. But done right, it could feed a table full of strangers and leave them feeling like family. Chopping without words. Marcus peeled carrots with surprising speed. Caleb diced onions with even, measured movements, pausing every few minutes to adjust the knife grip Marcus had not yet mastered. "You press with your palm," Caleb said quietly. "Let the blade do the work. You are not forcing it. You are guiding it." Marcus nodded. Said nothing. But adjusted. Over the next 30 minutes, they chopped celery, cubed potatoes, and opened cans of tomato paste and crushed tomatoes. Marcus stirred the pot while Caleb added flour to brown the meat cubes. The scent began to fill the room. Not loud. But steady. Like hope simmering. A flash of panic. As the stew thickened and the pot began to bubble, a small fire broke out on the other side of the kitchen, nothing major, just a dish towel too close to the stove, caught at the edge. Someone shouted. A volunteer grabbed the towel and smothered it quickly under the sink. But the flash of heat, the rising smoke, and the panic jolted Marcus. He froze. Then backed away from the pot. Caleb saw it instantly. "Marcus," he said, voice firm but gentle. The boy's face was pale. His hands shook. "It was not your fault," Caleb said. "No one was hurt. It is over." "I thought," Marcus swallowed. "It felt like, before." Caleb nodded. "I know." He rolled over beside the boy and handed him a wooden spoon. "Smell the stew. Tell me if it needs salt." Marcus took a deep breath. Nodded again. And stirred. Serving time. By 6 p.m., the folding chairs were full. The tables were lined with baskets of rolls, bowls of apples, pitchers of water, and stacks of mismatched plates. People from the neighborhood. Elderly couples. Single parents. A woman who lived in her car. A father with 2 teenagers who looked like they had outgrown their jackets by last month. Caleb stood at the serving table, ladle in hand. Marcus stood beside him with a towel slung over one shoulder and a focused expression. The first guest approached. Caleb smiled. "Welcome," he said. "Would you like stew?" She nodded. Caleb ladled a portion into the bowl and passed it down the line. Marcus added a warm roll to the plate without looking up. They did it again. And again. And again. Each bowl filled with hours of work. With small slices of healing. The sound of eating. There was no grand applause. No music. No speeches. Just spoons clinking gently. The occasional quiet laugh. A cough. A sigh. And the unmistakable sound of people eating because they were hungry and grateful. Marcus watched them. He sat beside Caleb on the edge of the kitchen door, a small bowl of stew in his lap. "You think they like it?" he asked. Caleb took a bite. The meat was tender. The carrots had softened without losing shape. The broth was thick with flavor. "They like it," he said. Marcus smiled. But only for a second. Then returned to watching. A visitor with a note. Toward the end of the evening, a man approached the kitchen quietly. He was tall, wearing an old brown coat and work boots dusted with sawdust. He looked like someone who had seen too much in one lifetime, and not enough kindness in any of it. He handed Caleb a folded napkin. "Someone told me to give this to the cook," he said. Then walked out without another word. Caleb opened the napkin. Inside was a torn sheet of notebook paper. "That stew reminded me of something my grandmother made. I have not tasted anything like it in 20 years. Thank you. You made a bad day good again." The cleanup. Marcus stayed until every dish was washed. He dried each plate carefully, humming something under his breath that Caleb could not recognize. When they finally left, Caleb rolled beside him down the sidewalk. "You did good today," he said. Marcus looked at his shoes. "My hands still shook." "They will stop," Caleb said. "Yours do not." "They used to." Marcus nodded. Then said, "Can we cook again?" Caleb smiled. "Absolutely." The notebook. Back home, Caleb added another page to the growing collection. Tonight, a pot of stew was enough. Enough to gather strangers. Enough to quiet the noise. Enough to help a boy remember he is more than panic. And enough to remind me that stillness can be shared. That warmth can be passed. One bowl at a time. Part 9, the first lesson. The rain started early that morning. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle that softened the corners of the city, made everything quieter, a little slower. Caleb Briggs sat near the window of his apartment, watching droplets trace patterns on the glass. A kettle hissed on the stove behind him. He had been awake since 5. Some habits never broke. The invitation had come the day before. Darlene had called just as he was finishing a simple dinner, grilled chicken thighs with roasted Brussels sprouts and mashed sweet potatoes. She told him the youth director at the shelter downtown was asking for help. They run a life skills group every Friday, she said. One of the caseworkers heard about the stew. They wondered, well, if you might come teach a meal. Caleb had paused. Not because he was unwilling, but because he understood what it meant. Cooking was one thing. Teaching was something else. Still, he had said yes. The shelter. The downtown shelter sat in a converted church. The sanctuary had been stripped of pews years ago and turned into a multi-purpose room, folding chairs, long tables, a scratched linoleum floor, and bulletin boards filled with reminders, free health screenings, school registration dates, emergency numbers. The kitchen was in the back, small, tight, but usable. The youth program met once a week. 6 teenagers. 3 boys, 3 girls. Ranging from 15 to 18. Some in temporary housing. Some couch surfing. All of them pulled from lives that had taught them too much too soon. Caleb arrived just before 4 p.m., his chair gliding across the uneven floor, a cloth grocery bag on his lap filled with ingredients. He had chosen the recipe carefully. Stuffed bell peppers. Not complicated, but colorful, filling, and forgiving. They could be made with meat or beans, rice or quinoa, cheese or none at all. Like people, Caleb thought they could be different and still hold everything they needed inside the room. The teens did not speak when he entered. They watched. One girl with a shaved head nodded once but did not smile. A boy in a hooded sweatshirt looked at his phone, pretending not to care. Another girl leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, face unreadable. Marcus stood by the sink, already washing produce. He had arrived an hour early. Caleb rolled up beside him. "You ready?" Marcus looked at him and nodded. "I told them you would not talk too much." Caleb grinned. "I will try not to disappoint." Peppers and knives. They started by washing the peppers. Caleb explained the steps without lecturing. "Cut across the top like you are removing a lid," he said. "Scoop the inside gently. We do not waste what we do not need to." One boy rolled his eyes. "Why not just chop the whole thing and throw it in a pan?" Caleb replied calmly, "Because structure matters. If we hollow it, we can fill it. If we destroy it, it holds nothing." There was a pause. Then one of the girls, maybe 15, said, "That makes sense." Caleb nodded. Cooking teaches you what people forget. The filling. Marcus helped saute onions and garlic in a pan, the scent rising through the kitchen and pulling attention toward the stove. Caleb explained ratios, how rice needed moisture, how seasoning was not about salt but balance. They added diced tomatoes, cumin, oregano, black beans, and a splash of lemon juice. Then cheese. Just enough. Each teen got a pepper to stuff. The boy in the hood squeezed his too tightly, splitting the side. He cursed under his breath. Caleb did not correct him. He handed him another. "Try again. Softer this time." The boy did. And it held. The oven and the weight. Once the tray was full, Caleb guided Marcus in placing it into the oven. The smell began to shift, richer, warmer, a mix of spice and comfort that settled into the corners of the room like something sacred. The teens sat while it baked. Caleb said little. He sipped water. Watched the rain through the back window. After several minutes, the girl with the shaved head spoke. "Did you really stop a bank robbery?" Caleb looked at her. "People tell stories. I was just there." "You were calm?" "I was afraid. I just knew what to do." She looked away. Then whispered, "I do not." Caleb nodded once. "You will. In pieces. Not all at once." The first bite. When the timer rang, the room shifted. Marcus opened the oven. The peppers were roasted, their edges slightly blistered, the cheese golden and bubbling on top. Caleb handed out plates. One by one. Each teen took one. They sat on the floor, or on counters, or leaned against the sink. No one rushed. They chewed slowly. Savored. Said nothing at first. Then the boy who had ruined the first pepper said, "This is good." Another added, "It's like, really good." And someone else, softly, "I cannot remember the last time I ate something hot that tasted like this." Cleaning up. They washed dishes in pairs. Wiped the counters. Saved extra peppers for the fridge. Marcus stayed quiet, helping one of the girls stack clean plates into the drying rack. When the kitchen emptied out, and only Caleb and Marcus remained, the boy finally asked, "You think it helps?" "What?" "Feeding people." Caleb looked down at the empty tray. "Yes. Even if they forget the taste, they will remember the moment." The notebook. Later that evening, back home, Caleb wrote, "We filled peppers today." A room of tired kids stood in silence and learned how to cook. One boy broke his first one. He tried again. It held. That is what hope looks like. A second chance. A warm meal. A pepper that does not fall apart. Part 10, A Bowl of Warmth. The sky was turning dark earlier now. It was only a little past 5 in the evening, but the streetlights had already blinked on, casting long, uneven shadows along the sidewalks of the neighborhood. Caleb Briggs was just finishing a pot of lentil and vegetable soup when the knock came. 3 knocks. Then silence. Not hurried. Not loud. Just uncertain. He turned off the burner and wheeled toward the door. Through the peephole, he saw a hooded figure standing on the landing, shoulders hunched, backpack slung low. Caleb opened the door slowly. It was Luis. One of the teens from the cooking class. The one who had broken his first pepper, then filled the second one like he meant it. A strange hour for a visit. Luis shifted awkwardly in place. He did not take off his hood. His eyes were red, but not from crying. More like from lack of sleep. Caleb did not ask why he was there. He simply said, "Come in." Luis hesitated, then stepped inside. The apartment was modest, warm lights, clean but not fussy, the smell of soup still hanging thick in the air. There were books on a shelf, a potted plant on the windowsill, and a worn jacket hanging neatly near the door. "Sit where you like," Caleb said, wheeling back to the kitchen. Luis sat at the table. Said nothing. Did not take off his backpack. Caleb ladled the soup into 2 ceramic bowls. He sliced a piece of day-old sourdough, toasted it lightly, then buttered each half and cut them on the diagonal. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just hospitality. The sound of soup. He placed the bowl in front of Luis. A spoon beside it. No words yet. Luis took one bite. Then another. The third one slower. He exhaled through his nose, like the heat had settled something inside him. Caleb sipped his own quietly. The soup was simple: red lentils, diced carrots, onions, celery, garlic, a pinch of cumin, lemon zest, and a touch of crushed red pepper. It was the kind of food that asked for nothing, but gave something back anyway. A mouthful of silence. Luis did not speak until the bowl was nearly half empty. Then, without looking up, he said, "I walked for 2 hours." Caleb nodded. "Something happened?" Luis shrugged. "I got into it with my cousin. He says I do not contribute. That I just eat and sleep and get in the way." "You live with him?" Luis nodded once. "He is not wrong." But it still felt like a punch. He took another bite of soup. Then stared into the bowl. "I did not want to go back tonight. I thought about walking until morning." "And instead, you came here," Caleb said. Luis looked up for the first time. "I do not know why." "You did not want to be invisible." Luis blinked. His jaw clenched. Then loosened. The tension beneath hunger. Caleb remembered hunger from his time abroad. Not the hunger that gnawed at the stomach, but the kind that gnawed at the soul. The kind that told a person they were a burden. That they took too much and gave too little. It was a lie hunger told people in silence. And silence was louder than any insult. Bread with butter. Caleb pushed the plate of toast closer. "Eat the bread," he said. "You will feel more like yourself." Luis took one half. Bit into it. It crunched softly. Steam rose from the edge. The butter had melted perfectly rich and salty, clinging to the brown surface. He chewed slowly. Then looked up again. "Why do you do this?" he asked. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Feed people?" "No. Teach. Let people come over. Give away your food." Caleb took a breath. "Because I know what it feels like to think no one sees you." Luis lowered his eyes again. "Most people look away." Caleb nodded. "They are afraid they will feel too much if they look too closely." A story shared in pieces. "I was in a bank a few weeks ago," Caleb said. Luis nodded. "I read about it. I had a choice that day. I could have stayed quiet. Let someone else take control. But I saw the fear in people's faces. And I remembered what it felt like to freeze." He paused. "I made a decision to do something. Not because I knew I would win. But because it was better than doing nothing." Luis stared at him. Then whispered, "I feel frozen most days." "You came here," Caleb said. "That is movement." The room where it happened. They sat for another 20 minutes. The rain had picked up now. Luis finished the soup. Then the bread. Caleb poured them both water and added a slice of lemon to Luis's glass. The boy drank half before pausing. "I do not know where else to go," he said. "But I did not want to steal. And I was so close." Caleb felt the ache behind those words. "You are still close," he said. "But not in the direction you think." Luis set the glass down carefully. Then asked, "Can I come help at the next meal?" "You already started," Caleb said, motioning to the empty bowl. "A place at the table." Before leaving, Luis folded his napkin. Tucked it into the corner of the plate. He stood slowly, like his body was remembering itself in stages. Caleb offered him a spare jacket hanging near the door. "It will rain harder soon." Luis hesitated. Then slipped it on. The sleeves were long. But not too long. He pulled the hood up and stepped out. "Thank you," he said, not turning back. Caleb watched him disappear into the rain. And for the first time in years, felt a familiar fire in his chest. Not adrenaline. Not urgency. But purpose. The notebook. That night, Caleb wrote. "Tonight, a boy came to my door with a storm on his back. He left with bread in his hands. And warmth in his stomach. I think we forget that hunger is not always about food. Sometimes it is about being allowed to take up space." He did not ask for help. He asked for a table. And a spoon. And a second chance to feel full. Part 11, the menu they made. The following Thursday, Caleb Briggs sat in the back room of the community center with 5 teenagers and a whiteboard. Marcus was there, sitting nearest the window. Luis sat beside him, his hands tucked inside the sleeves of a borrowed sweatshirt. The others were familiar now: Kayla, with the shaved head and quiet presence, Milo, always drumming his fingers on the table, and Jasmine, who spoke less but saw everything. Darlene stood by the coffee pot, holding a clipboard and a red pen she never actually used. "All right," Caleb said, tapping the whiteboard with the end of a dry erase marker. "The next open table night is 5 days away. I am not picking the menu this time. You are." The room was quiet. Then Kayla raised her hand. "I vote for pasta." Luis nodded. "Something with sauce. Like real sauce, not the kind from a jar." Marcus grinned. "Garlic bread. Definitely garlic bread." Milo leaned back in his chair. "We need a salad. If we do not put green stuff on the table, it looks sad." Jasmine spoke last. My aunt used to make chicken meatballs. With parsley and lemon zest. I could ask her for the recipe. Caleb nodded. He started writing. The final menu. Main course, pasta with homemade tomato sauce. Protein, chicken meatballs with lemon and parsley. Sides, garlic bread, mixed green salad with vinaigrette. Dessert, to be decided. Dessert, Caleb said, turning back to the group. That is the tricky part. Kayla shrugged. What if we made something people could take home? Louise raised an eyebrow. Like what? Cookies, she said. Wrapped in paper with a note. Marcus smiled. A cookie and a kind word. Caleb underlined it on the board. That might be the most important thing we serve all night. Shopping in pairs. The next day, Caleb and the teens split into teams for shopping. He went with Luis and Jasmine to the downtown market, while Marcus and Kayla walked 2 blocks over to the discount grocery with a list and a crumpled $10 bill. The teens compared brands, checked dates on packages, and argued gently over the right kind of tomatoes. This one has basil in it already, Jasmine said, holding up a can. We do not need shortcuts, Luis replied. Caleb let them disagree. Learning how to cook was not just about flavor. It was about learning how to decide. They returned with full bags and tired arms, but also, surprisingly, laughs. The day of the meal. By 3 p.m. on Monday, the kitchen at the center was full of steam and rhythm. Luis browned the meatballs, a dozen at a time, in a heavy skillet Caleb had brought from home. The sizzling echoed through the space. Jasmine stirred the tomato sauce slowly, her eyes never leaving the pot. Marcus was in charge of the garlic butter, brushing it over tray after tray of sliced bread before sliding them into the oven. Kayla tossed the salad in a large silver bowl, her movements confident, almost meditative. Milo handled the dessert chocolate chip cookies, shaped by hand, each one pressed gently with a fork. There was no shouting. No chaos. Only movement. And purpose. A simple table. By 6 p.m., the tables were set. Mismatched plates. Folded napkins. Pitchers of iced water with floating lemon slices. On each chair, a handwritten card. We are glad you came. Please eat with us. You belong at this table. Caleb rolled to the corner of the room and just watched. They had done it. Without him leading. They had done it together. The meal begins. The line moved slowly. Guests entered, removed their coats, and were greeted by Marcus and Kayla at the door. One woman clutched her handbag close but smiled when Luis offered her a plate. Milo handed out bread with practiced ease. Jasmine scooped pasta, then sauce, then added 2 golden meatballs to each plate. And as people sat, ate, and nodded between bites, something began to happen. The room changed. Not its shape. Not its walls. But its weight. It felt lighter. Full. Complete. Cookies and paper wishes. After the meal, each guest received a small brown bag tied with twine. Inside, 2 chocolate chip cookies, a paper napkin, and a handwritten note from one of the teens. Caleb watched a man in a faded jacket unfold his card. He read it. Then held it to his chest. Not the cookies. The card. That was what he needed. A question at the door. As the night wound down, Caleb stood near the back exit, watching trays get washed, tables wiped, chairs stacked. Luis walked over, a towel slung over his shoulder. He hesitated. Then asked, "Why did you let us lead tonight?" Caleb looked up at him. Because trust is not something we give after people prove themselves. He paused. It is something we give so they can become who they are supposed to be. Luis looked down. Then nodded. and said, quietly, I think I want to do this again. The notebook. That night, back home, Caleb wrote. Tonight, I was not the teacher. I was the witness. A tray of garlic bread. A bowl of salad. A room full of people who showed up for something warm. And cookies wrapped in kindness. We did not fix the world. But we made it gentler. One plate at a time. Part 12, The Empty Chair. The kitchen was quieter than usual. It was Friday afternoon, and Caleb Briggs sat at his usual station near the prep counter, a folded cloth napkin in his lap and a carton of fresh eggs resting beside a bowl of chopped herbs. He had planned to show the teens how to make herb omelets simple, fast, and affordable. But there were only 4 teens that day. Luis was missing. No call. No message. Marcus had already texted him twice. Kayla had called once, then muttered, went straight to voicemail. Milo kept glancing at the back door like someone might walk through it and change everything. But no one did. Cracks in the calm. The silence stretched too long. Caleb rolled forward, scanned their faces, and spoke gently. Anyone know where he was last? Marcus answered, eyes low. He told me Wednesday night he was crashing at his cousin's again. Said it was rough, but he could handle it. He say anything else? He looked tired. Like, more than usual. Kayla folded her arms. I do not think he's okay. Caleb nodded slowly. He understood that kind of absence. Not one that announced itself. One that drifted out of view. A memory in the pan. Caleb turned back to the counter and cracked an egg. It sizzled as it hit the pan. The familiar sound sharp, then settling into a soft, comforting hiss. He added the chopped parsley, some salt, and a bit of cheddar cheese. As the egg set, he remembered Istanbul. A boy there named Musa, only 17, who used to bring breakfast to the safe house without fail: 3 eggs, 2 flatbreads, and strong tea. One morning, he never came. No knock. No tray. Gone. Caleb had never asked the others what happened. He had not needed to. Some absences do not come with explanations. Only ache. A knock at the edge. Just after the omelets were plated, there was a knock at the side door. It was Darlene. She stepped in with her coat still on, her face tight with worry. Caleb, she said. I just got off the phone with a friend at the shelter. Luis came in last night with a split lip and a bloody nose. Refused help. Left before anyone could get him to stay. Marcus stood up too fast. Where did he go? No one knows, Darlene said. But someone said they saw him this morning near the underpass off 5th and Melrose. Caleb's jaw clenched. He knew that place. People went there when they did not want to be found. The journey to 5th and Melrose. An hour later, Caleb wheeled down the uneven sidewalk under a gray sky that threatened rain. Marcus walked beside him, holding a thermos and a paper bag filled with food. They found Luis sitting alone beneath the overpass, his back against a cold cement wall, a tear in his jeans and dried blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked up slowly. Saw them. Then looked away. I told you not to come, he muttered. Caleb did not speak right away. He wheeled closer. Then opened the paper bag. I brought you something hot. Luis shook his head. I do not deserve anything right now. That is not your call to make, Caleb said. He unscrewed the thermos. Steam rose from the spout. The scent of warm eggs and herbs drifted into the air. Marcus handed him the sandwich, an omelet folded inside 2 slices of buttered toast, wrapped in foil to keep it warm. Luis stared at it. Then, slowly, took it. He did not eat right away. He held it like it might vanish. A quiet meal on the cold ground. Caleb and Marcus sat with him in silence. No lectures. No demands. Just presence. Luis took a bite. The first one was cautious. The second one faster. By the third, tears slipped down his cheeks, unnoticed by him, but not by the others. Marcus pulled a pack of tissues from his coat and placed it beside him. Luis wiped his face and kept eating. The breaking point. After he finished, he looked at Caleb. Eyes red. Voice cracking. I tried to go back there. To my cousins. He told me I could stay if I gave him my phone. Said I owed him for eating too much. I said no. Caleb's voice was calm. That took strength. Luis laughed bitterly. Then he pushed me down the stairs. Marcus inhaled sharply. Did you report it? No, Luis said. I just ran. He looked down. I am so tired. Caleb nodded. I know. Luis turned to him. How do you keep showing up? Caleb thought for a long moment. Then said, because years ago, someone fed me when I thought I did not matter. And it reminded me I still did. The way back. They helped Luis up slowly. He winced but walked on his own. Caleb did not press him. Did not offer a grand solution. But as they reached the curb, he said, you can stay at the center tonight. It will not fix everything. But it will be warm. And no one there will ask you to give up what is yours just to be safe. Luis nodded once. That was enough. A small dinner together. Back at the center, Caleb made another meal. This time it was simple rice with lentils and caramelized onions. The smell filled the kitchen rich and golden. He served each of them a bowl. Luis ate slowly. Marcus, beside him. Kayla joined them without asking. Milo brought cookies left over from the previous event. Jasmine passed out cups of ginger tea. They did not talk about what happened. They just ate. Together. The notebook. Later that night, Caleb sat by the window in his apartment. He opened his notebook and wrote. He did not want help. But he wanted not to be alone. I have learned that when people are hurting, it is not our voice that heals them. It is the warmth we bring. The food that does not ask questions. The silence that does not judge. Today I fed a boy who thought he had run too far. He did not know that we make the road back with every bite we are willing to share. Part 13, Luis's Dish. The morning after the rain, the world looked rinsed. Sidewalks gleamed. Leaves shivered clean in the breeze. The air held that rare city stillness, the kind that made things feel new, like something had shifted beneath the surface. At the community center, Caleb Briggs sat near the back door peeling cloves of garlic for that evening's meal. The teens would be arriving soon, and the kitchen would fill with its usual rhythm of chatter, clatter, and soft tension. But today was different. Luis had asked to lead. 2 days earlier, he had stood at the counter, freshly showered, wearing borrowed clothes that fit better than his usual ones. I want to cook something, he had said quietly. Caleb had looked up from his notebook. For us? For everyone. For open table night. The group had gone silent when they heard. Not because they were surprised. But because they understood the weight of it. Luis had not just asked to help. He had asked to serve. The menu, arroz con pollo. He wanted to make arroz con pollo. Not the boxed kind. Not the shortcut version. But the one his mother had made when he was little on Sundays, when things were still good. Chicken thighs, Luis had said. With garlic, onions, peppers, and rice cooked in the same pot. She used saffron if she could afford it. Or turmeric if we were broke. Which one are you using? Caleb had asked. Luis smiled. Turmeric. But I am not broke. It had not been said with arrogance. Just quiet defiance. A declaration that he was still standing. The preparation. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen smelled like every warm thing ever remembered. Luis had arrived early. Marcus helped him rinse the rice until the water ran clear. Jasmine chopped bell peppers, green, red, and yellow, and arranged them in neat piles. Kayla seasoned the chicken thighs, rubbing each one with cumin, oregano, salt, and a touch of vinegar. Milo stirred a pot of broth infused with turmeric and garlic. And Caleb? Caleb sat at the end of the counter, offering suggestions only when asked. This was not his night. It was Luis's. The first sizzle. When the chicken hit the pan, everyone stopped. The sound was electric. A hot skillet, olive oil, and seasoned meat meeting flame. Luis turned the pieces carefully, browning each side. He moved slowly but with confidence. He was not rushing. He was remembering. When I was 7, he said aloud, I stood on a chair and helped my mom stir the rice. I was not allowed near the stove, but she let me pour in the broth. He turned and looked at the group. She called it a pot that feeds the soul. No one interrupted. They let him speak. Let him own the space. Layer by layer. He added onions and peppers to the pot. Then garlic. Then the rice. He stirred gently, toasting the grains just until they began to catch on the bottom. Then the broth. Saffron was missing, but the turmeric glowed golden. He covered the pot. Lowered the heat. And said nothing for a long time. The others began washing bowls and wiping the counters. There was no rush. This meal needed time. Setting the table. Luis chose the tablecloth, a pale blue one with embroidered corners that had not been used in weeks. Marcus arranged forks and spoons. Jasmine filled pitchers of water and added slices of lime. Kayla folded napkins into triangles and placed them beside each plate. Milo lined up the chairs. And in the center of the table, Luis placed a bowl of fresh cilantro and a dish of lime wedges. He looked at Caleb. Almost ready. Caleb nodded. And smiled. The reveal. When the lid came off, steam filled the kitchen. It smelled like something older than any of them. Something sacred. The rice was fluffy, flecked with bits of garlic and red pepper. The chicken glistened, browned and tender, resting on top like a crown. Luis spooned the dish into large serving bowls, garnished each with a pinch of cilantro, and carried them to the table himself. People had started to arrive, neighbors, families, a few regulars from past dinners. They greeted each other with soft hellos and sat down quietly. There was something reverent about the room. The first bite. Caleb watched from the far corner. He did not speak. He did not guide. He simply observed. A man in a dark coat lifted his fork, took a bite, and closed his eyes. A woman leaned into her first mouthful, then reached for a second before swallowing the first. A little girl with braided hair broke her bread into pieces and used it to scoop the rice. Luis stood near the kitchen door, fidgeting with his sleeve. Then someone clapped. Just once. Then again. And the room followed. Soft applause. Nothing loud. But honest. Words on a napkin. After the meal, as the guests began to leave, one woman stopped beside the kitchen window and slid a folded napkin across the counter. For the chef, she said. Luis opened it. Inside. I came tonight feeling invisible. This food reminded me of being home. Not my real home, but the one I imagined when I was a child. Thank you for giving that back to me. Luis folded the napkin slowly. Tucked it into his pocket. And turned to Caleb. I want to do this again. Caleb nodded. You just did. A new kind of notebook. That night, Caleb opened his notebook but did not write. He closed it instead. He passed it to Luis. There is room in here for your words too. Luis looked down at the worn leather cover. Then opened to a blank page. He picked up the pen. And wrote. Tonight I fed people with the only recipe I remember. I thought it would break me. Instead, it rebuilt something. I am not who I was when I walked into that kitchen. I think that is what healing tastes like. Part 14, The Holiday Table. The invitation arrived on a Monday afternoon. It was not printed on fancy paper. Just a plain white envelope with the words "To the Open Table Team" scrawled across the front in blue ink. Inside was a handwritten note from the city's housing outreach coordinator. We will be holding a community holiday dinner next Saturday at the Union Hall. We expect between 150 and 200 guests. We would be honored if your team would prepare the meal. Caleb Briggs read the note twice before placing it on the counter. Then he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. A question of readiness. The teens sat around the prep table that evening, the note passed from hand to hand like it might burn someone. Marcus stared at it for a long time. Luis chewed his thumbnail. Milo broke the silence first. 200 people? Kayla muttered, "That's not cooking. That's war." Jasmine folded her arms. "We are not ready." No one argued with her. Caleb tapped the edge of the table. "Let's break it down." They looked at him, waiting. You have cooked for 30. You have cooked for strangers. You have cooked under pressure. This is different, Luis said. Yes, Caleb agreed. Because this time, you are leading everything. The plan. They spent the next 3 days building a menu. Simple, comforting, scalable. Main dish, roasted chicken thighs with herbs and garlic. Side 1, mashed potatoes with olive oil and roasted garlic. Side 2, green beans with caramelized onions. Bread, Parker House rolls, made in batches ahead of time. Dessert, apple crisp with cinnamon and oats. It was not fancy. But it would be warm. And filling. And kind. That was the goal. The doubt beneath the lists. On Thursday, while washing a crate of potatoes, Jasmine said softly, "What if we mess this up?" Caleb glanced at her. "What if you don't?" She shrugged. "That's not what I asked." He dried his hands and wheeled over to her station. "You remember the night we served cookies with notes?" She nodded. "Do you remember the faces?" Yes. None of them asked for perfect. They asked for care. And you gave it. She blinked hard. Then returned to peeling. The big day. The Union Hall kitchen was enormous. Stainless steel counters. 2 industrial ovens. A walk-in fridge. More burners than Caleb had seen in years. The team arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, aprons on, recipes taped to the walls, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. Darlene had recruited 2 adult volunteers to handle the dining room. Caleb stayed in the kitchen, where he belonged. He had not felt this kind of tension since the day of the bank robbery. But today, the only thing that could go wrong was a meal. And he could live with that. Roasting doubt. Luis managed the chicken. He seasoned each tray with a blend of rosemary, thyme, garlic, salt, and lemon zest. He set timers. He double-checked temperatures. But by noon, something was wrong. The third batch came out too pale. Kayla noticed it first. "These don't look right." Luis ran a hand over his face. "I followed everything. Same time. Same rack." Caleb wheeled over and sniffed the tray. The heat is uneven, he said. One of the oven fans is not working. That is why it looks steamed instead of roasted. Luis took a step back. Great. Now what? Split the batch, Caleb said. Move half to the top oven. Give it 10 more minutes. Luis stared at him. Just like that? Just like that. Luis nodded. And did it. The table of hope. At 5:30 p.m., the doors opened. Guests streamed in, parents with small children, men with worn coats and gentle eyes, elderly couples moving slowly, people who had nowhere else to go. The smell of roasted chicken, garlic, apples, and cinnamon filled the hall. Marcus and Jasmine served plates. Kayla ladled mashed potatoes. Milo poured drinks and kept the tables wiped. Luis stayed in the kitchen, managing trays and sending out food like a general in command. Caleb watched him. There was sweat on his brow. But his hands were steady. And his heart was all in. The compliment. Around 6:15, a man approached the kitchen window. He wore a faded military jacket. His beard was thick with gray. He held up his plate and said, "Whoever made the chicken, thank you." Luis froze. Then stepped forward. "I did." The man nodded once. "My grandmother used to make chicken like this. You brought her back tonight." He placed a hand over his heart. And walked away. Luis looked down at his shoes. Then back up at Caleb. No words passed between them. But none were needed. The final dish. As guests began to leave, Caleb brought out the last tray of apple crisp and placed it on the dessert table himself. He had not cooked it. But he wanted to serve it. He scooped a portion onto a paper plate, passed it to a little girl, and smiled when she said, "It smells like my mom's kitchen." He did not ask where her mother was. He just handed her a second spoon, in case she wanted to share. A circle at the end. After the cleanup, the teens sat in a circle on the kitchen floor. Plates of leftover crisp in their laps. Shoes off. Voices low. Marcus whispered, "We did that." Milo nodded. No one even complained. Kayla smiled. It felt like something big. Jasmine leaned her head against the wall. "I'm tired in my bones." Luis said nothing. Until everyone had finished speaking. Then he looked around. And said, "I am proud of us." The notebook. Later that night, Caleb opened his notebook and wrote. Tonight, no one asked for the story behind the food. But I saw it. I saw it in every bite. In the way Luis opened the oven door like it mattered. In the way Jasmine watched over the beans like they could break. In the way Marcus laughed when someone asked for seconds. This was not a meal. This was a moment. A holiday without walls. A room where everyone had enough. And for the first time in years, I believe that maybe we are becoming something permanent. Part 15, The Dish You Remember. The invitation came by email. Darlene printed it out and handed it to Caleb over a mug of chamomile tea. It was a formal request from the City Cultural Engagement Board, inviting the Open Table team to participate in a local Voices of the Community event, an annual gathering where artists, musicians, and activists shared their stories. This year, the board wanted to highlight food as a vehicle for healing. Darlene smiled as she passed it to him. They want you to speak. Caleb looked down at the page. Bold letters. A small city seal at the bottom. He did not answer right away. A room full of strangers. The event was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In an old theater downtown. Marcus was excited. Milo wanted to bring his drums and offer music between speeches. Kayla had already begun outlining what they might say about Open Table Night, how it had changed their lives, How food became a language between people who once thought they had nothing to say. But Caleb stayed quiet. He listened. He nodded. But he said little. Luis noticed it first. You are not going to talk, are you? Caleb paused. I have spent most of my life behind the curtain, he said. That is where I belong. Luis frowned. But your story is the reason we started cooking in the first place. Caleb folded the invitation and slipped it into his notebook. Then maybe it is time for your stories to lead. The soup of memory. 3 days before the event, Caleb made lentil and carrot soup. He had not made it since Luis came to his door weeks ago. The recipe was the same: red lentils, chopped carrots, onion, garlic, cumin, turmeric, and a splash of lemon at the end. He stirred slowly, letting the aroma rise, steam warming his face. The kitchen was quiet. The kind of quiet that invites memory. He remembered a winter night in Serbia. A soup shared with a woman whose name he never learned, in a shelter built from tin and tarp. She had ladled the stew into a tin bowl and said, "Eat this. It will keep you from disappearing." That was what food was. Permission to remain. The conversation. Luis arrived that evening without warning. He knocked once, then opened the door when Caleb called out, "It's unlocked." He carried a paper bag with fresh bread inside. You said soup, he said. I figured it needed company. Caleb smiled. They sat together. The soup was ladled into heavy ceramic bowls, and the bread was sliced thick, crusty on the outside and soft in the center. Luis took a bite. Then said, "You know why you have to go, right?" Caleb looked up. Luis continued. Because everyone in that room has seen the headlines. But no one knows what really happened. They do not know you stayed calm when someone pointed a gun in your face. Or that you stayed because people needed you more than you needed to leave. Caleb stirred his soup slowly. I was not calm, he said. I just knew what would happen if I ran. Luis leaned forward. That is exactly the story they need to hear. The fear beneath the words. Later that night, after Luis had gone, Caleb sat at the window with his notebook. He opened it. Stared at a blank page. But he could not write. He was not afraid of speaking. He was afraid of being seen. Years in intelligence had taught him to vanish, to move quietly, to deflect attention. He had spent a lifetime becoming invisible. But food had done something strange. It had made him visible again. And now, the world was watching. A decision in the kitchen. The morning before the event, Caleb stood in his kitchen, a tea towel draped across his shoulder. He cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. Added a pinch of salt and parsley. Whisked them by hand, listening to the rhythm of the fork against porcelain. He melted butter in a pan. Poured in the eggs. They spread across the surface, quiet and golden. As they set, he folded the edges inward, shaping something that was more than food. It was order. Control. Stillness. He placed the finished omelette on a plate. A slice of toasted sourdough beside it. He took a bite. It was soft, balanced, warm. And it reminded him there were parts of himself still alive that he had buried long ago. He finished the meal. Then reached for the printed invitation on the counter. He folded it. Slipped it into his coat pocket. And whispered aloud, "All right." The day of the event. The theater was full. Rows of folding chairs, a small stage, a microphone flanked by 2 standing lamps, and a table near the back with trays of food provided by open table volunteers. The teens were nervous but ready. Kayla read first, sharing how she once ate dry cereal for dinner every night for a month and how learning to cook with others helped her believe in her own hands again. Milo played a song between speakers, a soft rhythm on a hand drum that made the floor feel like a heartbeat. Jasmine described how the scent of onions now reminded her of safety, not stress. Marcus told a joke. No one expected it, and everyone laughed. Then it was Luis's turn. He spoke of arroz con pollo. Of broken family dinners. Of how roasting chicken for strangers had made him feel like a human being again. And when he finished, the room went still. Darlene walked to the microphone. Our final speaker, she said, is a man who never wanted to speak. He just wanted to feed people. But sometimes, feeding people is how you begin to speak. She looked toward the side of the stage. Caleb. The words that were enough. He wheeled up slowly. The lights were not too bright. The silence was not too heavy. He looked at the crowd. Then said, I do not have a recipe to give you tonight. I just have this. There was a day when I thought I was done. I had lost my purpose. My place. My voice. And then, someone gave me a sandwich. It was cold. Simple. But it was enough to remind me that I still existed. That someone thought I mattered enough to eat. And now, every meal I help make is just a way of passing that forward. We do not need to fix the world. But we can feed it. One dish. One person. One moment at a time. He stepped back. The room rose with him. Not in noise. But in stillness. In understanding. The notebook. That night, Caleb opened his notebook and wrote. I spoke today. I said things out loud that I thought I had buried. I told them about the sandwich. About the day I remembered I was still here. I think stories are like meals. We do not always remember the ingredients. But we remember the way they made us feel. And tonight, I felt fed. Part 16, The Dish He Forgot. 3 days after the Voices of the community event, the doorbell rang just after 9 in the morning. Caleb Briggs had not expected anyone. He had just finished brewing his morning tea, a black Assam blend with a hint of cardamom, and was slicing an apple when the chime echoed through his small apartment. He rolled to the door and opened it slowly. A man stood there. Early 60s, tall, clean-shaven, with a face that looked more tired than aged. He wore a military-issue jacket and carried nothing except a folded newspaper in one hand. He stared at Caleb. You were in Kosovo, he said. Caleb blinked. The apple slice paused in his fingers. I was. So was I, the man replied. You saved my interpreter. Caleb looked at him for a moment longer. Then stepped aside. Come in. The man's name. His name was Robert Denton. He had served in the intelligence branch of a recon unit. Caleb remembered the name now. Denton had been posted near the border city of Mitrovica during the final months of deployment. They sat at the small table near the kitchen. Caleb placed a second cup on the table and poured the tea. Denton unfolded the newspaper and tapped the page. I read about you. The bank. The community dinners. The event. Caleb sipped his tea, quiet. Denton leaned forward. Why did you not ever come back? It was not asked with accusation. It was asked like someone who had been waiting for an answer for decades. The silence between soldiers. I had nothing to come back to, Caleb said finally. I stayed too long over there. I lost the rhythm of home. Denton nodded. I lost it, too. But I tried to rebuild it. I started by making coffee every morning. Just like my grandfather did. Caleb smiled faintly. I started by boiling rice. Denton took a long breath. I had a daughter. She was 6 when I left. 19 when I came home for good. We never got it back. I think I was always a ghost to her. I never had a family, Caleb said. I thought I was protecting people by staying away. And instead? Denton asked. I forgot how to be near them. A dish remembered. Denton stood and walked slowly around the kitchen, stopping at the small bookshelf in the corner. He picked up a worn recipe card tucked into a frame beside the window. You still make this? Caleb looked over. It was a card labeled rosemary stew. He had not made it in years. I wrote that down in 2003, Caleb said. I tasted it once in Bosnia. The woman who served it refused to accept payment. She gave me the recipe instead. Said food only works when you do not owe anyone for it. Denton nodded slowly. I remember that stew. You ate it? You made it. Back in the shelter. Caleb's hand tightened around his mug. I did not remember. I never forgot, Denton said. Cooking for the past. That evening, Caleb searched through his pantry. He found the rosemary. Dried, not fresh. He found the lentils. The potatoes. The beef. The onions and garlic. He had everything except the wine. He went out and returned with a modest bottle of red, the same brand he used when he could find it. The scent of cork and herbs filled the kitchen as he began chopping. By 6 o'clock, the stew simmered in his heavy-bottomed pot. He stirred slowly, careful to scrape the brown bits from the bottom. The flavor built there, he remembered. He was not cooking for anyone in particular. But in his bones, he knew this dish had meaning now. It was more than memory. It was unfinished business. An uninvited guest. At 6:30, there was another knock. This time, it was Jasmine. She stood on the threshold in her school uniform, holding a small bag of green beans. I heard you were cooking, she said. Caleb stepped aside. You always know when to arrive. I brought something. She placed the beans on the counter, then pointed to the pot. What is it? Rosemary stew, Caleb said. With beef and wine. Old recipe? Older than you. She grinned and tied on an apron. Sharing the dish. They sat together at the table with 2 steaming bowls of stew and thick slices of crusty bread. Jasmine took a bite first. Her eyes widened. This tastes like something that's been waiting to be made. Caleb chewed thoughtfully. I think it was. They ate in silence for a while. Then Jasmine said, I don't have many recipes from my parents. You will write your own. I already did, she said, after that first meal we made. Caleb looked at her, curious. I wrote down the salad. The dressing. The way you said to toast the garlic just until it sings. Caleb smiled. I forgot I said that. I didn't, she said. Because when I cooked it for my aunt, she cried. Caleb looked down at his bowl. I am starting to think food keeps track of what we forget. A return to form. The next morning, Caleb mailed a letter to the City Cultural Engagement Board. Inside was a copy of the rosemary stew recipe, along with a note that read, This dish was served without fanfare. It was forgotten. Then remembered. Like most of us. You asked what food means. It means I am still here. He placed the envelope in the outgoing mail slot. Then returned to his kitchen. He opened his notebook and wrote. Today I remembered a dish I had forgotten. Not because it tasted good. But because it was offered without anything expected in return. I think the meals that matter most are the ones we give to no one in particular. That stew fed strangers once. Tonight, it fed me. Part 17, Jasmine's Table. It started as a question. They had just finished cleaning up from open table night, another successful evening of roasted chicken, warm potatoes, and apple crisp. The last chairs were stacked, the kitchen swept, and the leftover rolls wrapped in foil. Jasmine stood near the sink, drying her hands with a cloth towel. Her braid was half undone, the elastic sliding from its end. She looked across the room at Caleb and said, "Can I host the next one?" No one spoke at first. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Luis blinked once, then nodded. Kayla said, "Absolutely." "And Caleb?" He simply smiled. A story waiting to be served. Jasmine had always worked quietly, efficient, watchful, focused. But beneath that stillness, something had been building. After the community storytelling event, she had written a dozen new recipes in her notebook. They were not from her mother or father, both long gone from her daily life, but from memory, from instinct, and from what she had tasted in other people's homes over the years. Some of them are guesses, she admitted to Caleb later. But they feel like stories waiting to be served. He understood. Planning the meal. Jasmine chose the dishes herself. Main dish, coconut curry chickpeas with roasted sweet potatoes. Grain, basmati rice with cardamom and bay leaf. Salad, shaved cucumber and red onion with lime and mint. Bread, flatbread, pan-fried with garlic and sea salt. Dessert, mango pudding with a ginger snap crumble. Each dish held a part of her. The curry came from her grandmother's pantry, once smelled, never forgotten. The rice was something she had eaten at a friend's house when she was 10. The salad was hers alone, bright, sharp, cool. A thing she had invented when she wanted to taste clarity. And the pudding? That came from a dream she had once, when she imagined what sweetness might feel like if it melted slowly, gently. A different kind of nerves. The day of the meal, Jasmine arrived at the center at 10 a.m. She brought 2 large canvas bags of ingredients, a worn notebook, and a portable speaker that played soft jazz while she prepped. Luis handled chopping. Marcus measured the rice and filled the pot with water. Kayla kneaded the flatbread dough with quiet strength. Milo tested the speakers in the dining room and offered to light some candles at the tables. Caleb stayed back, watching from the kitchen doorway. She was nervous. But she moved with purpose. Confidence grows like yeast, quiet at first, then unstoppable. A moment of doubt. Just before the guests arrived, Jasmine stood at the stove, staring down at the curry. The coconut milk was just beginning to simmer, the chickpeas warming through, the scent of turmeric, ginger, and coriander rising to the surface. She stirred once, twice. Then stopped. "What if it is too spicy?" she asked softly. Caleb rolled closer. He leaned in and smelled the dish. "Then people will taste it twice," he said. She laughed, but the worry did not vanish. "Are you scared?" she asked. He shook his head gently. "No. You brought yourself to the table. That is always enough." The first plate. At 6 p.m., the room filled. Familiar faces. New ones. A mother with 3 children sat near the windows. An elderly man with a cane took a seat near the corner. 2 young women shared a plate and whispered between bites. Jasmine stood behind the serving table, ladling curry over rice with a steady hand. She added a wedge of lime to each plate. A spoonful of salad. A folded piece of flatbread. She said thank you. Smiled. Waited. Watched. The first bite always says the most. The silence of chewing. The first surprised smile. The second bite without a pause. And then they came back for seconds. Mango and memory. The pudding was served cold. Each portion rested in a small paper cup, a sprinkle of crushed ginger snap over the top. It tasted like summer held in a spoon. Bright. Soft. Hopeful. Jasmine walked between tables, checking in, clearing dishes, accepting quiet praise. One woman touched her hand gently and said, "This reminds me of home." But sweeter. Jasmine nodded. I was hoping it would. Sitting at her own table. When the last guest left, and the final table was wiped, Jasmine sat down. Her back against the wall, her apron stained, her braid now undone entirely. She looked at the group, Luis stretching his back, Kayla yawning, Marcus humming under his breath, and Caleb wiping his hands slowly with a towel. I cannot believe we did it, she said. You did it, Marcus replied. Milo grinned. I would eat that salad every day. Caleb looked at her. What do you remember most? She thought for a moment. Then said, the way people breathed differently after the first bite. Like their bodies let go of something. A new kind of confidence. The next morning, Jasmine returned to the kitchen to clean the floor. She was alone. The center was quiet. She turned on the speaker and played one of her favorite songs, soft vocals, slow piano. Then she reheated a small bowl of curry and rice. Sat at the counter. Ate slowly. No pressure. No one watching. Just herself, the meal, and the knowledge that she had given something real to the world. She had fed others. But she had also fed herself. The notebook. That night, Caleb opened his notebook and flipped to the page Jasmine had written months before. He smiled. Then turned to a fresh page. And wrote. She cooked a meal made of memory and instinct. She served it without apology. And when people tasted it, they remembered things they thought were gone. A lime wedge. A spoonful of mango. A salad that reminded them to breathe. She does not know it yet. But she just became someone's memory of kindness. That is what it means to cook from the soul. Part 18, The Taste of Goodbye. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Jasmine stood on the steps of the community center holding the envelope like it might vanish if she blinked. It was cream-colored, with a gold emblem on the corner, Institute for Urban Culinary Arts. She read the first line 3 times before the words made sense. We are pleased to offer you a full summer apprenticeship. Her breath caught. She looked up at the sky, then down at the ground, then turned and walked straight to the kitchen, where Caleb was cutting herbs for that evening's salad. He looked up. Paused. Then asked, good news or better? She handed him the letter. Then whispered, they want me. The room changes. The others found out that evening. Marcus dropped his spoon into the soup pot and shouted, no way. Luis stood in stunned silence, then broke into the widest smile Jasmine had ever seen him wear. Kayla hugged her so tightly she almost cried. Even Milo, quiet, moody Milo, said, they would have been idiots not to take you. But Caleb only nodded. He did not say much. Not yet. The fear beneath the joy. Later, as Jasmine peeled garlic beside him, she spoke softly. It is only 3 months, she said. I will be back before fall. Caleb crushed a clove beneath his knife and said nothing. Jasmine hesitated. Are you proud of me? Caleb looked up. There was no hesitation in his eyes. Completely. Then why do you seem sad? He brushed the garlic into the bowl. Because when someone you care about finds their wings, he said, you do not just feel joy. You also feel the wind as they lift away. The taste of transition. They decided to host a special dinner. A farewell meal. A celebration. Not for an ending, but for the opening of a new page. Jasmine chose the menu carefully. Starter, warm lentil salad with caramelized shallots. Main dish, braised chicken thighs with preserved lemon and olives. Side, couscous with raisins and toasted almonds. Bread, cracked wheat flatbread with sea salt. Dessert, vanilla custard with pomegranate syrup. Each dish had weight. Not because of difficulty, but because of memory. She wanted the meal to feel like a final chapter written by hand. Preparing the meal. The kitchen buzzed with nervous joy. Jasmine moved with quiet intensity, focused, graceful. Marcus took charge of the bread. Kayla whisked the custard base until her arm ached. Luis diced olives with methodical precision. Caleb roasted the almonds, slowly, letting their aroma fill the air like a promise. Milo assembled the playlist, low jazz, soft drums, voices like shadows. No one talked about what would happen next. They just cooked. Together. Like always. A room full of love. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was full. More guests than usual. Neighbors. Former regulars. Even Darlene brought her son and granddaughter. Candles flickered in small glass jars. Fabric napkins rested on each plate, tied with string and sprigs of rosemary. Jasmine emerged from the kitchen holding the first tray of braised chicken, and for a moment, the room stood still. Applause followed, not loud, not staged. Just enough to say, "We see you." The bread that said everything. At the end of the night, when plates were mostly empty and dessert had been passed around, Jasmine walked over to Caleb's table. In her hands was a single piece of flatbread, folded in half, still warm from the oven. "I made this one just for you," she said. Caleb looked at her. Took the bread. He tore off a piece, dipped it in the lemony sauce from his plate, and took a bite. Soft. Salty. Bright. He nodded once. "You made something permanent." The conversation that was needed. After the cleanup, when the others had gone home, Jasmine stayed behind. She sat on the stool beside Caleb, her apron still dusted with flour. He passed her a cup of tea. She took a sip. Then asked, "Are you going to miss me?" He did not answer right away. Instead, he said, "I was a soldier for 20 years. I have buried people I did not know. And forgotten faces I should have remembered. But what I regret most are the people I let drift away because I told myself it hurt less than holding on." Jasmine stared at her hands. "I will come back." "I know," he said. "But you will not be the same." She smiled. "I hope not." The notebook. That night, Caleb opened his notebook and wrote, "She is leaving. Not because she is done here, but because she has more to become. She brought lemons to chicken. Pomegranate to cream. She brought flavor where there was once only survival. And now, she brings herself to something new. We fed her. She fed us. And somewhere in that quiet exchange, we became something more than cooks. We became a family." Part 19, The Apron That Remained. The first Friday night after Jasmine left, the kitchen felt different. Not broken. Just rearranged. Like a room after someone moves out, not empty, but touched by absence. The sounds were the same, the clatter of pots, the hum of the fridge, the sizzle of onions on the stove. But the silence between those sounds had changed. No music played. No one danced while dicing vegetables. And the apron Jasmine always wore still hung by the back door, folded neatly, untouched. A gentle shift. Caleb arrived earlier than usual. He rolled through the kitchen door at 2:45 p.m., his sleeves already rolled, his mind quiet but alert. Luis was already there. He stood at the prep station, peeling carrots. A large pot of water steamed beside him, and 2 onions rested in a silver bowl. They greeted each other without words. Just a nod. A rhythm had formed between them, one Caleb recognized from field kitchens and safe houses. It was not made of noise or instructions. It was made of trust. Stepping into the space. Luis cleared his throat halfway through slicing the carrots. Then said, "I thought we could make soup tonight. Something hearty." Caleb raised an eyebrow. Soup? With noodles, Luis added. And herbs. Maybe beans. It is cold out there. Caleb nodded. Sounds like a meal that remembers people. Luis gave a small smile. Then returned to chopping. The recipe they did not write. There was no written plan. No printed recipe. But the soup came together like something learned through lineage. Marcus arrived and offered to toast bread, thick slices brushed with olive oil, then sprinkled with sea salt and cracked pepper. Kayla worked quietly on a fresh salad, shaved cabbage, grated carrot, lemon juice, and just a hint of maple syrup in the vinaigrette. Milo measured out spices and roasted garlic on a sheet pan, humming a slow, unfamiliar melody. Caleb observed. Gently corrected. But mostly? He stayed out of the way. They were building something on their own. The table without her. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was filled. The regulars came. So did a few new faces, drawn by scent, by routine, or perhaps by memory. One woman, wrapped in a thick shawl, stopped at the serving table and asked, "Is the girl with the mango pudding here tonight?" Louise froze for a moment. Then answered, "She is learning somewhere else right now. But she will be back." The woman smiled. "I hope so. She made me feel like home." The first bowl. The soup was ladled into deep white bowls. It was full of color: orange from carrots, green from kale, red from kidney beans, the soft golden hue of broth steeped in garlic and thyme. The noodles were wide and soft. The kind that folded instead of snapped. Luis watched carefully as the first few guests took their seats. He watched as they blew on the broth. Sipped slowly. Lifted their spoons again without hesitation. That was the signal. It was working. The bread beside the bowl. Marcus passed around the toasted slices. Each one had a smear of butter that had just started to melt, pooling in the creases. Kayla brought small bowls of the salad and encouraged everyone to try it even if they did not like cabbage. One older man, whose name no one knew, lifted his spoon after finishing and said, "This is the kind of meal you hope for and never ask for." Luis heard it. But he did not speak. He just nodded once. Then turned back to the stove. Letters from a distance. Later that night, after the kitchen had been cleaned and the final dishes stacked, Caleb pulled a folded letter from his jacket pocket. It had arrived that morning. It was from Jasmine. The envelope was sealed with a sticker shaped like a spoon. Inside, written in her careful script. "Today I made a mistake. Burned a tray of rice because I tried to multitask like you taught me not to. But I started over. And the second tray was better. Everyone here is brilliant. And fast. And competitive. But they do not know how to breathe when cooking. Not like we do. I miss the soup. The quiet. The crumbs on the counter. I miss being needed. But I am learning how to need myself, too. Tell them I said hello. And tell Luis the broth should always come to a soft boil, never a full one. He will understand." Reading it aloud. Caleb read the letter aloud to the group the next day. Luis chuckled at the broth comment. "She is right," he said. "She usually is," Kayla added. Marcus looked at the folded apron hanging by the door. Then said, "We should hang that in the kitchen. Like, properly. Not just leave it sitting." They agreed. They hung it above the spice shelf. Pinned with care. Not as a shrine. But as a thread. The notebook. That night, Caleb returned home and sat with his tea. He opened the notebook and began to write. Tonight, they cooked without her. But not apart from her. They chose soup. A food that holds people gently. The broth had garlic and thyme. The bread had salt. The salad had a sweetness we did not expect. The kitchen moved without instruction. It remembered. It grew. And so did we. Part 20, The Table That Waited. The sun was already high when the door to the community center swung open and Jasmine stepped inside. She was dressed in soft linen pants, a pale blue top, and a scarf tied around her hair that shimmered gold in the light. Her shoes were dusty from travel. Her eyes were tired but bright. She carried a small black case in one hand, and in the other, a folded piece of paper, a new recipe. The kitchen stood empty for now, filled only with morning sun and the echo of quiet laughter from last week. Then footsteps came. One by one, they arrived. Kayla first, holding a basket of lemons. Then Marcus, carrying herbs wrapped in newspaper. Milo had a speaker slung over one shoulder and a bouquet of mint in his hand. Luis came last, wheeling in a cooler with both hands. "I hope you are ready," he said, smiling wide. "We saved this night for you." The plan. Jasmine clapped her hands together and laid the folded paper on the counter. "I brought back something I learned at the institute," she said. "But I changed it. Made it ours." She looked at Caleb, who sat at the end of the kitchen island, sipping his tea, watching them all with quiet eyes. "No orders tonight," she said. "You just sit." He raised an eyebrow. "I do not sit well." "You do today," Kayla said, placing a cushion behind him. "You earned it," Luis added. "Let us serve you for once." Caleb looked around at the faces he had helped build, not just feed, but form. And he nodded. The menu. Appetizer, fresh cucumber ribbons with yogurt mint drizzle and pomegranate seeds. Main course, lemon herb chicken thighs with golden couscous and summer vegetables. Side, roasted red pepper hummus with garlic flatbread. Dessert, warm honey cake with orange blossom glaze and pistachios. Jasmine directed them like a conductor. She moved with ease now, confident, joyful. She assigned tasks with a smile. Marcus zested the lemons. Kayla whisked the glaze. Luis chopped red peppers and brushed bread with oil. Milo, for once, handled the playlist with something soft and cinematic. And Caleb? He sat. And watched. And breathed. A different kind of fire. The kitchen was warm, not from tension, but from life. The smell of roasting garlic drifted beneath the sweet scent of honey warming on the stove. Mint leaves were torn gently by hand. Orange zest curled in bowls. Pomegranate seeds sparkled like tiny rubies across ceramic plates. Jasmine plated the cucumber salad like a mosaic, ribbons layered over one another, mint drizzle spiraling across the surface, seeds sprinkled like stardust. "It looks too pretty to eat," Milo whispered. "Then we are doing it right," Jasmine replied. "The table is set." They pushed 3 folding tables together. Covered them with a linen cloth. Set the mismatched plates in place with care. Each setting had a folded card with a name written in colored ink, not just the regular crew, but a few special guests from the neighborhood who had become part of their orbit. Darlene. Mr. Leonard, the retired carpenter. Jasmine's aunt. And at the center, Caleb. His name written in large, bold letters, with a small sprig of rosemary tucked beneath the card. The light in the room. When everyone was seated, the room hushed. Sunlight poured through the windows, turning the floor into gold. The salad was served first. Crunch met coolness. Pomegranate seeds burst on tongues. Mint cooled the mouth while yogurt soothed it. Murmurs of delight passed through the guests like wind over wheat. Then came the chicken, golden and glazed, resting atop vibrant couscous flecked with zucchini, red pepper, and slivers of scallion. The hummus was served beside it, rich and smoky, with warm garlic bread stacked in linen-lined baskets. And finally, the honey cake. Amber-colored. Sticky and fragrant. topped with crushed pistachios and curls of candied orange peel. The moment he did not expect. Caleb lifted his fork, took a bite of the chicken, and closed his eyes. He tasted lemon first, bright, clean. Then thyme, garlic, and a depth of flavor he could not name but felt in his chest. The couscous crumbled gently on his tongue. The hummus was smooth and bold. And the cake. The cake was not dessert. It was gratitude. He looked at Jasmine. She was not watching him. She was watching everyone. Smiling softly to herself. He looked around. People were laughing. Eating. Refilling their plates. Sharing bites. No one was checking the clock. Because for once, time was not passing. It was standing still. A speech without notes. Caleb cleared his throat. The room quieted. I spent most of my life serving from a place of duty, he said. It is what I knew. What I was trained for. But what you all taught me, what this table taught me, is that service without love is just labor. He paused. This food, these hands, this table, they are not here because someone told us to care. They are here because we chose to. He looked at Jasmine. And you reminded me how beautiful it is to be served. Not as a guest. But as someone who belongs. There was no applause. Only stillness. And then. Someone raised a glass. To belonging. The room lifted their glasses. And they drank. The final entry. That night, alone at his window, Caleb opened the notebook one last time. He wrote. She returned. And the kitchen opened like a sunflower. The food was bright. Sweet. And full of courage. I sat. I was served. I was seen. We did not save the world. But we created a place where no one walks in hungry. And leaves unseen. This notebook is full now. Not with recipes. But with reminders. That food remembers us when we forget ourselves. And in a quiet kitchen, filled with light, I remembered what it means to live.